Bring this meeting to order, please. We did have a closed session earlier, so we're going to continue this council meeting with the singing of the national anthem. Mr. Nairn. Canada, our home and native land. Thank you, Mr. Nairn. It's always a pleasure when you're here, sir. So we're going to kick off tonight's meeting with a bit of a tribute to one of our town employees who is presiding over a town council meeting for the last time in her career. So Susan Greatrix has been our town clerk for I guess almost 5 years now, over 5 years now. This is her 138th town council meeting. She has been a municipal employee for over 27 years, including 22 years at the City of Waterloo prior to joining us. Susan was born and raised in Orangeville. Interestingly, her first job was as a page at the Orangeville Public Library. And here she ends her career as an employee, once again, with the town of Orangeville. So. For those of you at home and are in the audience here today, if the town clerk kind of keeps council in check on all legislative matters, and she's the overseer of our bylaws and makes sure that the wording and that the actions of council are taken, properly in each meeting, and both during our council meetings and as we go about our daily business as council members. So, Susan, I want to thank you for your guidance in the time that short time that we've been here, this council, for the last 6 months or so. I know your advice has been greatly appreciated by all of us. Susan is moving to Ottawa to be close to grandchildren, so we want to wish Susan well in her move up to Ottawa, which is a beautiful city, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy your time there with your family, Susan. So once again, thank you. You're going to be missed, and we really appreciate the time and that you've spent with all of us here on council and the work that you've done for our town. So thank you. Okay, let's move along. First item of business is item number 6. This is adoption of minutes of previous council meeting. May I have a motion? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? That is passed. Now we're going to start with our presentations, and tonight we have Stacey Dobb, the President and CEO of Headwaters Healthcare, who's going to provide us an update on the strategic plan. Ms. Dobb.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and address Council. I want to acknowledge a couple of the board members who are here from Headwaters Healthcare Centre today. So Lori Kerr, who is the newest board chair of the hospital, as well as Ken Topping, who is chair of our governance committee and a committed board member. Right. So welcome. My objective today is, in a short 5 minutes, to give you a brief update on the hospital strategic plan and to talk about future directions of the hospital and the opportunity for the municipalities and specifically Orangeville to work together with the hospital to create a healthier community. In the last about a year, we have been undertaking a strategic planning process, and that process really saw us get out to many, many communities. I might need your help. I can't seem to forward this, so just enter.
Up and down.
Okay. Oh, I can keep talking. In the last year, we took the opportunity to really reach out to the community and try and reach out to as many groups, individuals, citizens, and had quite a tremendous success in that. We were able to connect with over 3,000 people in the community, including 1,500 citizens through our survey. But we were out at many events, including things like Rib Fest, the Jazz Fest, as well as the Orangeville Farmers Market on Saturdays. We just came out to meet people where they were and to hear from them directly about their experience with the hospital, both the good, what was really good about their experience in the hospital and what did they want us to do more of. But we also heard from people when they had a less than ideal experience with the hospital and giving us ideas and opportunities on how to improve. So the accumulation of that work over a period of time helped us to develop our new strategic directions. And I just want to highlight the 3 goals of the hospital for the next 3 years. So the first goal of the hospital is something called Getting Even Better. And it is the idea that if you really are to look at the performance of the hospital, whether it's from a quality perspective, a patient experience perspective, just this way? Okay, great. Or from a I guess a safety perspective, we do quite well. So we're in the top 10 performance of medium-sized hospitals and most of our hospitals, type hospitals, peers across the province and across the country. But there are opportunities to do better. So there are a few areas that we are really focused on. One, bringing even higher levels of quality and new ways to do that with our clinicians. The second one is increasing the way that we can bring more programs and services to the community. So what are the services and programs that are important to the community and how can we bring those closer to home? And we've had a lot of conversations with citizens, and I'll give you a couple of updates on things that we have already responded to. The last one around Getting Even Better, interestingly, one of the things that I heard from the hospital in being out and in terms of calls to the hospital is they want us to take care of the hospital itself. The facility is 20 years old, and people were concerned that parts of the facility had grown tired. The hospital emergency department is a great example. It was built for 20,000 visits a year. It's doing between 45,000 and 50 visits a year. It hasn't been renovated for 10 years, and for those of you who've been to the hospital recently, you could probably agree with me that it needs some tender, loving care and upgrading. So that's about getting even better. How do we make our programs and services higher quality, safer? How do we bring more programs and services? And how do we keep the hospital strong and vibrant? The second one direction is called Nothing About You Without You, and it has really 3 components to it. One is involving patients and families and citizens more in all areas of the hospital decision making. So we include now patients and families on our recruitment committees. They recently helped us hire our new chief of staff. They also helped us with the redesign work for the hospital in terms of the emergency department, but they also helped us make decisions about our programs and services. The second one is about more empowerment for frontline staff, and the third one is about nothing about the hospital without the community. So I believe that Headwaters Healthcare Centre is the community's hospital. It is the citizens' hospital. So we will not make any plans without engaging the citizen and the broader community in terms of the future. The last one is around integrated care closer to home, and this one is particularly relevant given the directions of the Ministry of Health and the current government in terms of trying to break down the silos that exist in healthcare and develop a more patient-centered integrated system, and I'll speak to that in a second as well. A few updates I wanted to give the Council. The first one is on the development of Ontario Health Teams. So the Minister of Health came out in February and made an announcement that they are moving to a different model of healthcare organization, something called an Ontario Health Team. They invited applicants from across the province. I'm proud to say that Minister Elliott's first stop after the announcement was to the Headwaters Healthcare Centre because she had heard so much about the community and its ability to care together. So she came out and visited the hospital to hear firsthand about integration in this local community. They have put out a call for applications, and Dufferin Caledon has, as a broader community, has submitted a application, a readiness assessment they call it, and we expect to hear likely in July whether we have been selected as one of the first generation Ontario Health teams. Even if we aren't selected as the first generation, we are going to continue to work together in earnest to develop a more integrated system. Tomorrow, in fact, we are meeting at Monaro Park. We have over 100 governors, patients, families, citizens, as well as healthcare leaders who are coming together to talk about a future vision for an Ontario Health team in this particular area. So there is a lot of excitement. There is also quite a bit of trepidation. One of the requirements, in addition to all the benefits of the Ontario Health team, they are really looking into the future to have a single point of accountability and funding. So it's very different from the present, where hospitals receive funding and long-term care receives funding and community services. This would be one funding envelope for the community to determine how they would see spending that money. I'm hopeful that that will give us a lot more flexibility in addressing some of the challenging issues and allow us to integrate our services even more than they are today. A few other updates. We are seeing considerable increases in our volumes, both on in our emergency department as well as our inpatient units. And in this particular winter, we have had several winters where we haven't really gone into what's called surge, when we are getting more patients than our capacity. In the last year and winter, we have gone into surge more than 30 times. So we have really had to work hard to think about how we can manage those volumes. And I consider the team at Headwaters to be a bunch of heroes. They really worked hard. And while we had some bad days, in particular, they put patients first and really worked hard as a team to try and support. Our cancer volumes are our biggest growing program. And that is not necessarily because there are more cancer cases, but it is because we're building the local capacity to be able to treat people locally. We have getting to be quite a full center, cancer center. We have oncologists who are coming up, and we're able to offer systemic therapy, chemotherapy locally. We're also now able to mix our own chemotherapy drugs, allowing us to be much more flexible in terms of supporting patients. That volume has continued such that we're working with Cancer Care Ontario to expand that program even more. And the real benefit of that program is to allow people to receive treatment, high quality treatment closer to home. So it's a real area of focus. Urology, we are reintroducing our urology back to the hospital, and that is based directly on what we heard from the community. When we went out to the community, we got a lot of requests to bring urology back to the hospital. So we have a urologist starting this summer who will have both a surgical program as well as an outpatient program for local citizens. And last, we're really working hard on palliative care with a number of clinical physicians in the community, and really starting to develop a much more integrated cross-continuum palliative care program for our community. Oh, I think I'm stuck again. Oh, there we go. A few things around the facility that I think are important for people to know. So we are being quite creative. For those of you who don't know, the hospital is about 20 years old. The ministry expects that hospital to last for about 50 years. And we are starting to see the wear and tear of a facility that's 20 years old. So we're working hard to do all kinds of upgrades, everything from partnering with places like Smile Zone to redevelop our many inside parts of our hospital. But we've also have the great benefit of having very generous donors. So there's two areas of the hospital that are destined to be redeveloped this year. The first is our whole main entrance and lobby. So many of you who have been at the hospital, we have a circular staircase, which is quite unsafe. It was built 20 years ago, but really needs to be removed. So we have a donor who's helping us to remove those staircases and redoing the whole lobby, making sure it's a very friendly, open center for people to come in. And in the same way, we have community donors who are supporting us to redevelop our emergency department. Those will be very significant renovations of the hospital. You really see the whole first floor. I'm telling you this in advance because, well, when we come out the other end, it will be a beautiful lobby and welcome center, and the emergency department is going to add treatment centers and will be a much more aesthetically and patient-centered place. It is going to be disruptive for the community as we renovate in terms of that process. We're hoping to get started with the Welcome Center and lobby in the summer and to have that finished by late fall, and the emergency department will follow shortly after that. Both of these projects, while they are being only funded by the community, there is no ministry dollars that are supporting this. We still have to go through a ministerial approval process. We have approval for the Welcome Center and just waiting for the emergency department. For those of you who haven't been out to our gardens, we really are seeing a lot of redevelopment at the gardens. We really want to make them a community space where families can come have picnics, people can spend their time there. Just a short brief, it's all done by volunteers. We have over 600 trees on the grounds that were all donated and planted by volunteers. We're partnering with the Grand River actually I can't remember which conservation area, one of the conservation areas around land water management, which I think would be of interest to Orangeville, and really a community effort to make sure not only the facility is well taken care of, but the properties that are around it. And last, thanks to you, it looks like we're going to get a new bus shelter with some cover. Right now we have no bus shelter at the hospital with no rain cover or element cover, so I wanted to thank the council for their support of that. In terms of the municipality and Dufferin County working together with the hospital, there are 3 areas that I think are going to be integral for the city and the municipality, the town and the municipalities to be involved. The one is the Ontario health teams. Health is more than healthcare, it's more than the hospital. And we really are going to be looking to extend that support out to looking for support from the municipalities over time. The second is around the medium-sized hospital challenge, which I'm going to speak very briefly to in a second. And the third is mental health and addictions. From my perspective, we have a critical issue in this community related to mental health and addictions. We don't have a system of care, and at this point, the hospital is really the place where most people go. We're hoping that the Ontario Health Team is going to be able to focus their energy and effort on mental health and addictions, but we'll be doing some provincial advocacy. We believe that we need more supports in the community, in the hospital, including potentially mental health beds locally, so maybe looking for your support on that. Lastly, I want to speak briefly on the medium-sized hospital issue. So I've spoken to council before around the medium-sized hospital issues, but there's 2 things that I think you need to know. One is that medium-sized hospitals across the province are the most efficient hospitals of any hospital, so more efficient than large hospitals, academic centers. And they have the worst working capital right across the province, and this just gives you a depiction of that. So you'll see medium-sized hospitals are by far the most efficient, yet on the working capital side, both as a percentage of total expenditures, we are really quite disadvantaged across the province. And from my perspective, this is an equity issue for local communities and this particular situation. This erosion and equity issue is a result of the funding formula. And while the minister has indicated her support to address this issue, and Orangeville Town Council has provided support letters, we have not actually seen a fix across the province. There will be many of us who will be attending the AMO delegation, putting in an AMO delegation potentially with Dufferin County, but other counties as well for this August, and have another audience with the minister. I know every time she sees me, she says, I know it's an issue and we're going to be working on it. But I also know that we need to keep up the pressure because it really is, I think, having a critical issue and erosion of services to medium-sized communities like Orangeville. And with that, I want to do just a very final note of recognizing some local heroes. We had our annual general meeting last week, and we had 2 recipients of the Dr. David Scott Award, who is a long-term physician who really did a lot for the hospital. One of the recipients was Tom Reed, who is sitting in the back, as well as Dr. Gord Willens, and it really was a great night to recognize some local heroes. I don't think people really know what Tom actually has done for this community, and I think it was a great opportunity for us to be able to recognize him. On the right side is a resident of Dufferin. Her name is Eileen Dahl. She is one of our patient advisors. So in addition to battling metastatic breast cancer, she is sitting on our Ontario Health Team leadership team. She met with the minister when she came here. She's attending the whole day symposium and really is a committed patient who wants to bring her voice to making healthcare better in Orangeville and beyond. So with that, see if you have any questions.
Thank you. Stacey, I wanted to ask you a question. I know there may be some other questions from council. Before the Ford government came up with this Ontario Health Team's idea, I met with the chair of Central West Lynn and a couple of board members, and the only thing I remember that meeting was them showing me statistics about funding and the fact that the Central West Lynn was funded at a rate of about 50% of the average throughout the entire province.
Correct.
So our healthcare dollars here are 50% of the average in Ontario. And can you shed some light on this history and how did we get to this point?
Yeah, so
And
there
why?
So there are two issues. So one is around most home and community services. It's just a historical issue. It used to be funded very differently, and those historic issues took root, and it's never been addressed, and it's only gotten worse over time as they have kind of shared the dollars across the province. And for the hospital, for the medium-sized hospital, it's the health system funding reform that has eroded the funding over time. So it is a real issue. I think with the Ontario Health Teams, their intent is to move to more of a population-based model, but they will have significant equity issues to address across the province, and they're going to have to be pretty creative to address them. The interesting thing about the equity issue is, despite that equity issue, if you think about some of the more systemic issues that happen in another community, like alternate level of care patients, so these are patients who are literally stuck in hospital and can't get elsewhere. Most other parts of the province, there are anywhere from 10 to 25% of their beds. In Headwaters Healthcare Centre, we sit around 4 to 7%. So despite the fact that we have all these pressures, we are showing a very high performance. And I think that's one of my critical messages to the minister is, in fact, I think sometimes we get penalized for good performance. And I think the funding formula is not really recognizing high performance and rewarding it. And so it makes you ask the question, when you're always feeding the issues that exist somewhere else and you're a better performer, I think that's also contributed to our erosion over time. So they know it's an issue. I think they know it's an issue going into the population-based model. I am not aware of any specific ideas that they have to address them.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up about mental health issues because that seems to be a problem here. I know that local health authorities and our police and paramedics are involved in the different situation table, which all of us on council are aware of, where vulnerable individuals are, they try to help them and work on a course of action for that particular case study. So hopefully we can continue that. But this idea of mental health advocacy, you know, it just overlaps into so many areas, from crime to addiction to homelessness. So we need more advocacy on mental health in our area, for sure.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet with Minister Jones last week, and she's also a big advocate around mental health. So I think there's a real opportunity for the community to come together, really understand some of the issues related to both prevention, but also support and treatment, and how we might be able to create a better model of care. I had a father of a patient call me last week in tears, and I listened to his experience, and the issues are so systemic that the best I could do was really spend a lot of time talking to him and trying to provide some support and some navigation, but the issues are a real challenge.
Right, so thank you to our health professionals and
Yes.
our police forces, local police forces, who are doing the best they can with what they've been dealt with, but there needs to be more resources put forward here. Any other comments? Here we go. Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and Ms. Dobbs, thank you very much for being here this evening, and the rest of your board. And again, I would like to also recognize Tom Reed for the effort he has done in the community. For those of us who've been part of the community a long time, has been really impactful and instrumental for care in this community. So congratulations on that recognition, Tom. And also thank you to your team. You know, for those of us who've used the hospital at various times, be that for emergency, for regular, as I call it, personal maintenance, it has been instrumental in seeing many of us who are actually sitting up here. But you made reference to a point that I just wanted to ask a question on, and this is based on the local health team. And you had mentioned about July being a very important part of the year. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that would mean if you are designated as a local health team?
Yeah, briefly. So the process is they put out a call for readiness assessments, so for communities to step up and put their hand up and put in a readiness assessment. They got over 170 applications from across the province. And there's going to be nowhere near 170 at the end. They've talked about 30 to 50, kind of border to border in the province. But the intent is to pick a subset of those 170 to then proceed to the next stage, which is to submit a full application. Followed by a full application, there would be a community visit. And then following from that, then you would be on the pathway to be designated by the Minister of Health as an Ontario Health Team. I think it is critical for this community to pursue this. In the absence of Dufferin-Caledon being an Ontario Health Team, you perhaps could be part of a much larger team, a team out of region. And there really is, when you operate on a day-to-day basis, perhaps like someone like Tom and his team do, there is a community and that the Dufferin-Caledon borders really do, I think, have a lot of partners that work in concert with one another. There's a lot of synergy in the way that people use different services and the way they interact. It doesn't mean that people can't use other services. It doesn't mean that you can't use other hospitals and so on. But it's the idea for things that are really in the community and much more local, things like mental health, things like palliative care in the community, that they would be designed and really responsive to the way that the community needs it. And I think the ministry over the last number of years has really realized that Ontario is not the communities are not homogeneous in any way, and you really have to let local communities plan their healthcare, especially if you want to get to population health and start to get more upstream. So it's a very positive thing. Just briefly, there are a couple of other changes that are happening at the same time, which is the amalgamation of public health, as well as the reorganization of the ambulance services. Mm-hmm. And while we are open to the ideas of thinking about how to do that differently, we will be advocating quite strongly that we need both of those services fundamentally integrated into this community. The reason why we are strengthened is the fact that Tom Reed sits on our senior management team. They're involved in the hospital, and in fact, we're one of the only hospitals I know where we have exceptional relationship with our ambulance partners, and that's because we really act as one team, and that's the goal of the Ontario Health Team. So we want to make sure that we don't lose any of that in some of the changes that happen.
I'm glad you referenced that because, again, I was very concerned when the government made the announcement of the consolidation and or the reduction of the centres, and I think that integrated model has worked out tremendously well for our region. So thank you for that clarity.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, moving along, we have Dorothy Peterson, Hanson High Density Awareness Group. Dorothy?
As a member of the Hanson High Density Awareness Group, my active concern at this time is the proposed development behind the Orangeville Mall. However, what I'm about to say should, I believe, apply to all of Council's decisions regarding Orangeville development. Orangevillians yearn for a high standard of decision-making from their municipal leaders. We want to see more intelligent decisions than those made in recent history. We never used to fear flooding, but we do now. We used to drift off to sleep hearing frogs singing, but we don't now. Our gardens used to be inundated with bees and butterflies, but not now. We used to feel our traffic flow was safe, but not now, nor our water, nor any number of other detrimental changes. These kinds of changes made us question the leadership that brought them about. Orangevillians want once again to have confidence in their leaders, to be able to trust their judgment. We want our leaders, you, to have the courage to think ethically and to take science into consideration. We hope you will truly lead and not simply do what others are doing or have done without regard for the long-term outcome. Your decision will affect not only what happens on a parcel of land, but by ripple effect, what will affect the neighbourhood, town, county, province, all the way to local climate change. Do you think I exaggerate? The NASA Earth Sciences website states that while climate change is a global issue, it is felt on a local scale. Cities and municipalities are therefore at the front line of adaptation. Despite the progress that's been made in climate science, a lack of political will among governments has led to policy gridlock. Meanwhile, with little publicity, many local communities have focused independently on their own climate-related problems. I have some examples. In British Columbia, a liquefied natural gas pipeline and marine terminal proposal, projects that were slated to bring $1 billion over 40 years to small communities on land that had also been slated for logging, for which a sawmill capable of handling the tallest and heaviest of the mature, valuable timbers had already been built, became a 3.1 million hectare grizzly bear sanctuary with all development proposals withdrawn and the land now protected. Closer to home, Amaranth Council recently had the courage to deny a 330-home development proposal for Waldemar. Mayors Rick Golding of Burlington, Jeffrey Daw of Aurora, Don Mitchell of Whitby, and Chris Friel of Brantford united and approached the Ontario government about fixing the Places to Grow Act, which is the dictatorial fuel for the current high-density debacle. We should remember that there is no penalty for not meeting the high-density requirements in that act. Decisions made significantly in favour of concrete construction and an unnatural forced increase in population have ignored the values of our community, and now the best we can hope for is to salvage what little is left of Orangeville's undeveloped land. I urge you to consider that as modern decision makers, you cannot believe something is acceptable just because someone's hired hand says it is so. You must consider intricate environmental science and understand the long-term effects that will come from your decisions. The Hanson development request is not simply an increase in density on a little pocket of land. It is an upheaval, a transformation that will affect the natural resources of the land, the street, neighbourhood, town, and by ripple effect, the province, country, and it will actually affect climate change. That puts you in a position to be leaders, not just in our community, but in our province and nation. You can save Orangeville by asking for more and better from your advisors, experts, and external agencies. But you have to be willing to dig deeply to find that nugget of gold that depicts the true outcome. You have to be willing to ask questions that people may not want to answer, but I am asking you to do that. In closing, do not allow yourselves to feel you have enough information or to be discouraged. Dig deep and then reflect your found wisdom to the legal counsel that will make your arguments at the OMB LPAT hearing. Arm him with the scientific information and proof and ask him to fight vigorously to save the last of Orangeville's open land.
Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, for your presentation. Any questions from council? Okay. We will take your presentation into consideration. Thank you. Next on the list of delegations is Sushil Shundil. Mr. Shundil. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. This is regarding my high water bill.
Can you tell us what address you're at, sir?
I'm at 318 Elderberry Street.
318.
Elderberry Street.
Okay.
Yeah. So I received a call from Orangeville Hydro on 23rd of April, and they said, I'm using excess of water. And followed by Sarah, we had a meter reading on that day, which was 4403 for the meter. And she said, we need to track it. For next 1 week, she started tracking, and from 23rd April to 30th April, the meter reading goes normal all of a sudden. It was just 10 units in 1 week. And she told me that the past bill is around $1,700 for the month of February, which means we use more than 350 units. She told me to take some measures and check the water leakage, which we have done. And there's no leakage. Then we call a plumber on 28th of April. He checked the house. There's no leakage. And there's no solution to it. She said, no, you use the water. There's no other way out. I said, what if it happens again? And from 23rd April to till now, we just used 61 units. And as per their record, we used 61 units in a week. And 10 days back, I received another bill of $1,400, which is for March. And there's no users again, and there's no leakage again. And nobody has answer to it. There's no leakage on the point, like there's no work done, there's no leakage. And when we approached them, they said there's a cost of meter reading to check the test the meter, which is $300. And to change the meter, it will be less than $300. But there's no surety. After planting a new meter, it might go fast. And being a slow meter, it's an old meter, 18 years old meter, it might be doing a slow reading. So my point is, if it can read a slow reading, it can be a fast reading as well. It can't be in favor of me. And that's how we are not sure how is the future going. Like maybe my next month, every day I'm worried that my next bill, how much my next bill will be. There's no solution to it. We are into low income. We moved to Orangeville last year only in July. And for 10 months, the average billing of our house is between 180 to 200. That too in summers, when we use most of the water, we do gardening as well. And in February, March, when you don't do this gardening, we don't have pool as well. And this much of almost 550 cubic of water can be possible for 4 members of the family. But we contacted everybody, and this is not me only. When we talked to Hydro, they said, you are the only one. I talked to a family, Gail and Larry Hooper, Mario Fierro, Don De Silva, and more who contacted me. There's so many last 1 year who paid $1,500, $6,000, but all in vain, then nobody got the solution. So that is my humble request to you to look into it and give us some relief for that.
Okay. Quick question to Mr. Jones. Do you know how many residents have made official complaints about water meters in the past year or so?
Your Worship, I don't have that exact number, but I would estimate that there's probably in the order of 10 to 15 on an annual basis.
Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you. Through you, Worship, to Mr. Sushil. Just a couple of quick questions. Were you away during any of that time?
Pardon?
Were you away on vacation during any of that time?
No.
You were home the whole time?
Yeah. For
Okay.
1 day, we used to go to my sister's house. That may be on the weekend, but not all the time.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a water softener?
No.
Did you ever consider getting your water meter checked?
I told them that paying a $300 for just a meter check, and Sarah told me that 90% the meter is correct and there will be no refund. Instead of going for a meter check, which will be checked by their team only, a new meter charged me less than that, which is around $250 to $70. So it's better to go for a new meter, and there's no question in the future that there's a problem with the meter. So my point is, like, it's an 18-year-old meter, and I have Googled it and I have talked with the people. We are talking about smart meters for so long, which we have for electricity and in which we can track our usage, but for water we cannot track it. That's the issue still there.
Thank you. Just for clarification, so you never got a new water meter?
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
Again to Mr. Jones, so we have on the plans in the Public Works Department replacement of meters. Can you tell us what the timeline is for that, Mr. Jones?
Certainly, Your Worship. One of the projects that we do have for 2019 is to look into what technology we should use to upgrade our water meters. To be clear, the part that we're truly trying to upgrade is the communications part. When the town entered into universal water metering in 2003, at the time, Hydro was sending a meter reader around to every home, and there was an economy of scale having them do that. Of course, Hydro's moved to smart metering. We would like to do something of the same sort. Putting a different register on top of existing meters that are relatively new, or replacing meters that have the newer registers that would allow us to track things in real time, would allow us to identify concerns of residents like Mr. Shundil more quickly, and identify, help them to sort out what the issue is and minimize the costs to them. What should be recognized is that it's really the communications part that is being upgraded, so that it would keep data on when water was being used and potentially allow alarms to be set to let residents know sooner. The actual technology that is metering the water, that is measuring the water, will be much the same as it is today.
Right, and as you've said in your report here, water going through the meter gets recorded. If it doesn't go through the meter, it's not recorded, correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Right. Councillor Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Jones as well. We had a brief conversation earlier, but for the benefit of those in the room and the public, could you perhaps expand on the concept of the testing of the meter? And if found to be faulty, would that cost of testing and the subsequent replacement of that meter be covered by the town?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, yes, if indeed a resident came forward and paid the $300 to have the meter tested, and we were to determine that the meter was indeed measuring more flow going through it than was actually being put through it, we would certainly reimburse the resident for both the cost of the testing and for the overages. I want to point out that this is an issue that has been in the newspaper somewhat lately, and we have spoken with some of our municipal partners and other municipalities who face some of the same sorts of problems. In terms of those other municipalities and their experiences, as well as those of Orangeville, we have never had a situation, and nor have they, where they have taken a meter, tested it, and it is measuring significantly more than is flowing through it. The way in which these meters are constructed is that they slow down as they get older. They do not speed up. They do not measure water that is not flowing through them. They can't physically do that. And as a result, it's not something we encourage people to do, to test the meters, because the result is not likely to demonstrate that significantly more water is going through the meter or being measured than is going through the meter. In the case of Mr. Shundil's residence, as he's noted, usage seems to have returned to normal. Therefore, I would suggest that there wouldn't be much point in testing that specific meter, because right now it appears to be measuring the approximate amount of water that would be expected to be used in that residence.
Right. Okay, Mr. Sushil, there's no mechanism in our bylaw to waive fees. We don't have that authority, so we have a conundrum here. You've got an exorbitant bill, and we don't know how to trace that problem. If you'd like to have the meter tested, there's a method by which we can do that additional expense, but at this point in time, unless somebody's got some magic potion here, I don't have an answer for you, sir.
There's an average usage of water in Orangeville and everywhere in Ontario. When I got a call on 23rd of April, they told me that there's a bill of $1,700. Although my second bill was almost generated on 26th of April, which is of $1,400. Being a consumer, they must told me that when my meter reading has been double or 3 times, why they waited for 8 times. It can be like average billing is 180. They should inform me why, even if you're using a mobile company and your data goes over, they disconnect that. And if we have to really save the water usage, they must have alarmed me at $500, $600, $800, which makes just one phone call. At that point of time, although there's no leakage, but at that point of time, somebody came in and we can raise the issue that one. They waited for 3,100 bill, a 2 months bill, which is 500 cubic water. And average usage of the house is around 60 cubic water. So they can intervene at 100 cubic, 200 cubic. Why they waited for 550 cubic water?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate. The meter reading is intermittent. I think is it monthly, bi-monthly, Mr. Jones?
Excuse me, Your Worship, the meters are read on a monthly basis.
Monthly basis. So what Mr. Jones was just telling us, that the town's intention is to move ahead with smart metering, which would allow the communication of a problem in real time, and that therefore residents would be notified by an alarm system of some sort if you did start to have a water meter charge that was other than normal. So going forward, we're going to have that in place. I'm not too sure how many years it's going to be. It's probably going to be 2-3 years from now. But as it stands right now, we don't have an answer for you, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay. Delegation 7.4, Mr. Gristo.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, member of the council, staff members, and ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, the reason I'm here tonight, I would like to see a bocce ball court being built on the Rotary Park. I done some of the homework already. I have some of the major players that they would like to come and contribute to do it. One will be the Chone Construction. The other one will be Greenwood. And the other individual, which they are the major players, will be Doug Harkness from Precast. So those are the major involvement and the cost to do this. So I would like to see this probably at no cost to the town, which is probably going to happen, no cost. What I'm proposing myself, and after talking to some people, it would be 3 bocce ball courts. I don't know if the council had an opportunity to see it. I think that...
We have it here in our agenda, Mr.
So you have it,
Gristo.
so you got the dimension there, but those dimension, they're not really carved in stone. It's whatever fit on the location of a very minimal work to be done. You only have to scrape the grass there, and then you place whatever needs in the middle there, and put the curbs, and there is the bocce ball court. So the 3 that we're talking about, one would be like officially a bocce dimension by 13 by 90. The other one would be what they call typical club dimension, which that's 13 by 76. And the other one would be typical residential dimension, which is 60 by 70. So, I mean, it's 3 categories that can be put in there. There is a lot of benefits to this. Many other municipalities, they do have them. I mean, Mono, they do have it, but they have I think, lawn bowling, which is a little bit different, but almost close to the same, but not quite the same. And I think there is a place here in town for that. It is a very good exercise for families, seniors especially, especially on a beautiful day. You go there, you throw the ball back and forth. So that's quite an exercise. And I think we need more for seniors to do in our town. Right. There is plenty here, but we need some more. So this is what I'm proposing. So there is 2 ways the council can go on this here. I'm sure you probably know this. You could defer this back to staff and bring back a report, or maybe you can put a motion that I can, meet with staff and proceed with this and get started, get building before the summer is over. This way council has an opportunity to come there and throw the first balls there. Right. That would be the idea. And a lot of the benefits too, and I want to talk a little bit about it, but then I have another gentleman here that would like to speak to you about it a little bit too. The idea behind this is we can form teams here. Now, the teams, the three higher with more scores, they will face off at the end of the tournament. So each player sometimes can pay $20, $25. So half the money could go, for the winners at the end of the tournament. The other half the money could be donated to a charitable organization. That would be one of the benefits.
I think we're jumping the gun here a little bit.
Hey?
I think we're jumping the gun a little bit here to
I know
talk
we
about
jump,
tournaments.
but I want to give you some of the benefits, Your Worship. So,
Right.
and that's why I'm saying this. So, and and then the winner of course, over the last three, could entice other teams from other areas to come in here, and you have a championship.
Right.
So there is many things that can really can work. So, but at
Okay.
this time, I'd like to recognize Your Worship through you, Bill Robertson. I'd like to say a few things about
Okay,
this.
you know, we have a 5-minute delegation
I
limit.
understand. My 5
Okay,
minutes
sir,
is pretty
come on
well
up
done.
and have a say here. Thank you.
I first met Nick, he cuts my hair, by the way,
Yeah.
at the Legion. I'm a member
Yeah,
of the Legion.
okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, I retired from the military. We played bocce in the Cyanide and with the Swedebacks. And it's unbelievable what the game's like and how much people it can involve. Orangeville's a prime example. There's nothing in the parks for the seniors. The seniors may have the lovely senior center. They got that, and matter of fact, they've got 8 senior centers in Orangeville. McDonald's and Tim Hortons. We got a park.
Well, we have a
down-
beautiful Diane Drive,
It's a beautiful drive.
Lions Sports Park that we've just built. There's some nice things for seniors there, sir.
Yes, but I do a lot of walking in Orangeville, and I don't see too many seniors in parks. That's a fact. But it's a game that anybody can play. With the park we're asking for, it's bus routes. We're close to McDonald's, and we're close to Tim Hortons also. There's a washroom facility. There's no safety involved in it. It's being paid for. The space is available. Washroom facilities are available. And it's a game that, it may not catch on, but it'll take 4 or 5 years. But at least how it's picked up is the seniors will walk by, or somebody will walk by and watch the game and ask if they can play. Anybody can play it, it's not skillful. And that's my point. And I came up in that, this was 4 years ago or 3 years ago. I asked Nick at the Legion, I said, how's your bocce coming? Oh, he said, they turn it down. I said, you're joking. And that's what I'm here for.
Right.
That's my point. That's the point
Right.
I want to make.
Okay. All right, so that's the proposal. We've got a couple of counselors want to ask some questions. Counselor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In general, I think as many activities and sports that we can have in our parks is a good thing, but I also like to take that long-term planning approach, and so my question is actually through you to Mr. Osmond. The Parks and Rec Master Plan that we'll be looking at in the next year or so, will it get down to the level of detail of looking at the utilization of our parks, potential for new activities in areas that are perhaps underutilized? Will that study go that far in depth?
Mr. Osmond.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Peters, yes, indeed. The master plan itself, first of all, will do a survey of residents, and also we'll talk to stakeholders. And we'll be talking about the kinds of facilities and programs they'd like to see in Orangeville, if not already here. Newly introduced activities such as bocce ball or other sports. It will also give them an opportunity to talk to stakeholders about whether or not you can have facilities built, and if there's not-for-profit organizations or whatnot in the community would like to contribute to that kind of a process. We'll also look at a 10-year view, so if it's something that would happen in a year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever the case might be, it will show up in the master plan in terms of if it's a viable option, or if they will also look at the facility spaces we have now, the park spaces like Rotary Park, Lions Park, and so on and so forth, and to tell us whether or not in the next 10 years you need to make changes and do repurpose some parks or put in spaces that are not there right now.
Very good. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and Councillor Peters, thank you very much for that very important point about the master plan. Just a couple of points. It is, if I'm not mistaken, Orangeville Seniors Week. Is that something that we have recognized with some activities that are happening at the Alder and Tony Rose? Is that something that's happening? I thought I saw something posted at Alder, so just for the sake
I believe you're correct, sir.
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of activities for the seniors of our community that in fact are going on in our great community. Mr. Gristo, would you have an idea how much it would cost for any maintenance of this particular bocce ball courts?
Actually, thanks for the question, Mr. Andrews. It's a very little maintenance to that. It needs once a year to take a rake through it if there is leaves. For example, if it's trees there, rake the leaves, make sure that you rake the ground, make it level, and that's all it is to it. It's not much maintenance at all. Even the players can do that.
So what is the surface then? The surface is?
The surface will be sand on the bottom, and then you put a special screening on the top, which you pack it down. That's all it is.
Okay, so there's no grass on it. It's not
There
like
is no
typical
grass.
lawn
The
bowling.
grass will be taken out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think if you've been following council, Mr. Grisso, you know that the town has given Mr. Osmond the authority to move ahead with a complete review of all of our recreational facilities. And my understanding is he's going to deliver that through a consultation sometime in the spring of 2020. Is that correct, Mr. Osmond?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Right. I personally don't have an issue with what you're suggesting, but I do know we need to go through a process with town staff, and I would like to make a motion to refer this back to Mr. Osmond for consideration in this master plan that, and, you know, the position that you've put it there, Mr. Gristo, in Rotary Park, it seems like a reasonable place. I agree with you. There's washroom facilities there. It's central to the town. But I think we do need to understand the entire cost of it and the maintenance of it and lighting and these type of things. I mean, I presume you could play it in the evening as well?
Well, it depends. It's up to the player.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not proposing any lighting.
Right. And I guess what the console...
Early nights. It's not really that you're there,
Right.
you know, at 11, 12 o'clock or 10 o'clock to play, so.
Right, and what this consultation will do is allow the needs and wants of the town to come together. And if there's sufficient needs and wants, particularly with bocce, then, you know, I presume it will be included in as we go forward in the planning for our recreational facilities. Yes.
Maybe through you, how long is gonna be before this master plan will come forward? See, the reason that I'm a little concerned about this, I have the players right now. They want to go ahead with it. The longer we wait, you might lose those players. They're not willing to do it anymore. So the sooner we do this, the better it is. So that's why I want to emphasize that, because I spoke to the actual players that they would do the work, so.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gristo, but we,
So,
you know...
My opinion,
You've been on council for many
Yeah,
years. You know
yeah.
the process, and it's not something that we would make a decision quickly on. It's something that we have to put back to town staff, and I think, you know, but in terms of timing, it's likely going to be the spring of 2020 before a decision was rendered on this. Unfortunately, I think that's the reality of the situation. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, you have something to add?
Yes, Your Worship. If you're going to make that motion, I will second it.
Right. So I think unless we have further comment from councilors that we want to receive your information, I think positively in the hopes that this will go through our consultation and come out on the other end with a positive result for you. Okay?
yeah, I would appreciate, I have no issues put the motion forward, defer it to staff. But really, to wait for this plan, master plan, that's a long time. So your motion should state, defer to staff. The staff will bring back a report, maybe even work with me if they needed some help, and then we can start the ball rolling now instead of waiting.
Was
Because
that a
if you
pun?
wait-
Was that a pun, or is that?
Eh?
Was that a pun?
I
Start the
don't
ball
know if
rolling?
it's a
Nick?
pun. I'm only telling you, been sitting on that seat in there, so I'm telling you the best and the fast approachable way to achieve this.
Yeah.
That will be the way. I mean, the other master plan for the other thing, I understand all that. That takes time. But this, you got the players now. They want to build it.
I
Whatever.
appreciate what you're saying. I believe that the motion on the floor is probably what we need to think about right now, and I believe that all recreational facilities are going to be encompassed within this consultation, and as I said, I'm hopeful that what you're proposing can be included at the end, all right? So
Okay.
I'm going to call a vote here. All in favor? So we're going to refer this back to council, Mr. Gristo, and it will be included in the consultation that will be upcoming. And I'm sure Mr. Osmond will be able to reach out to you for technical information and the consultant to talk to in the coming months. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Your Worship.
Okay, now we have item 7.5. This is a presentation from Susan Hall, the Vice President Partner of Lura Consulting. And Susan is going to talk to us about our Orangeville Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan. Susan, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council, staff, and the public who are here. I'm excited to have the opportunity to present our draft plan to you. We've been working on it with the community and steering committee for about a year, and now we're at sort of a final draft plan that we can share with you tonight. So I know I presented this last time, but I just want to give kind of a refresh about what this plan is intended to do. It is a sustainable neighborhood action plan, and it's about the future of the community. It is really looking at how residents and businesses can work together with the municipality to create greener, healthier community and place to live, work, and play. We talked quite about through the process of having a shared vision and shared goals, and worked through a very consultative process to get to the vision and goals that we have today. And we'll look at reducing the town's environmental impacts and improving quality of life for residents. So our process has been, we started with planning the project last summer, working with Ruth and a steering committee. We took a look at the existing plans in the town, reviewed the data that was available, and then went through a process of developing a vision and goals, strategies and actions, and an implementation plan with a draft plan ready at this stage, and then the final piece will be approval if you're happy with the plan. The plan was funded through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and that is the final step for them is council approval of the plan. So I just want to talk a little bit about the community engagement process that we went through. We chose to engage people through a variety of different approaches. We had community pop-ups at local events, so farmers market, community centers, those kinds of things. We had a community survey, so if people didn't have time to interact with us face-to-face, they could do a survey online. We held a series of stakeholder workshops, both in the fall, and then brought stakeholders back together in May this year. and talked through what the issues were that were important to the community, what they saw as opportunities through staff. We talked about what had they learned in terms of promising practices from other municipalities so that we could consider those here. We had an open house at the end. As I mentioned, we worked with a steering committee of town staff throughout the process, so they have been intimately involved the whole way through. And we also provided the open house boards online and gave people an opportunity to provide comments that way if they couldn't join us from that last open house. And we've had over 580 people contribute to the plan, some of whom are here tonight. So what we heard throughout the process was that this was an important initiative for the community. People were interested in having Orangeville lead by example. We talked quite a bit about quality of life and that community health and the well-being of residents was an important piece. Through the process, we had started with water as a theme and energy, and the community said we really need to round those out to be natural environment and climate change, not just water and energy. That the plan needs to be relatable and flexible. So we've got a plan and an implementation strategy, but we also have a recommendation to do annual work planning amongst the steering committee so that it can react and be responsive to funding opportunities as they arise. There's cross-referencing to implementing existing plans because a number of initiatives came up that we realized were already in things that the town has a plan for. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we've identified implementation of those. We had quite a long list of actions in our first round of review with stakeholders. So one of the key things was let's simplify it, consolidate where possible. And we talked about collaboration and engagement are important. So we have actions in here that you may do as a town, but you may also do in collaboration with the county, in collaboration with public health or other organizations. But we didn't want to lose them for you, even if others were working on similar initiatives. And then the last piece through the final phase was a real emphasis on having indicators and baseline data that'll help set the foundation. So we've included those in the plan as well. There's a couple of spots where we've identified conducting a survey where there really isn't baseline data readily available, but we've tried to use data that the town has access to now. So our plan, like many strategic plans, has a vision that sets the big picture. It's got goals, strategies, and then actions. So the actions are the activities and initiatives that would kind of churn through the process. Ideally, your vision and goals are more long-term and long-standing. So the vision, draft vision, is Orangeville is a thriving, green, healthy, and connected community. So when we talk to community about thriving, for them that word meant engaged, that it's got a strong and vibrant economy, and that there's affordable options within the town. Green covered all natural environment aspects, water, natural heritage. Urban forest came up as a key part of when we're thinking about natural environment. The urban forest needs to be included. Healthy from all lenses of health, so active, mentally healthy, social, relating to education and around local food, and then connected from a transportation perspective, from a getting around perspective, but also socially connected, inclusive, and complete. And then for community, that included everyone, businesses and residents. So the plan has the following key themes. We've got 8 goals, 22 strategies. There's over 100 actions in the plan because it's got short term, which are within a year or two, medium term, 3 to 5 years, and then long term, 5 years plus. And we've got 40 plus indicators based on readily available data that the town can use to measure success. So we've got corporate, climate change and energy, economic development, culture, natural resources, land use, social well-being, and transportation systems. For each of these, there's a goal. So in corporate and fiscal, we talk about municipal leadership, considering the environmental, social, and economic impacts in all of your decisions, which I know that you do now, but this is making it a long-standing goal. The strategies related to interdepartmental collaboration and communication, working in partnership with other municipalities and partner agencies, and then looking at how to integrate sustainability into your policies, processes, and practices on a regular basis. So the slides have just a couple of the actions. The action plan has a more robust list, but the types of things that are included are when you have new staff come to the town, having sustainability training for them. Waste was one of the areas that the community flagged, so we have included a couple that are related to town reducing waste, and also added in the town's role to advocate for waste reduction on a broader level. Things like green events and sustainable procurement are sort of within your realm to take a look at. Climate change and energy focuses on reducing greenhouse gases and becoming more resilient, looking at your energy needs now so that you have the energy you need for now and in the future. We talk about renewable energy generation is part of that, but reducing emissions and greater efficiency is a piece, as well as resiliency as we're adapting to climate change. So we've suggested actions around creating greenhouse gas emission inventories, both for your community as a whole and the town operations itself. Things like energy efficiency audits and retrofits, and then a climate adaptation strategy that will look at resiliency as we adapt to climate. Economic development and culture, we talk about Orangeville's small town appeal. We want robust business and tourism opportunities. So under this one, we talk about preserving and expanding tourism, culture, and heritage, looking at economic resiliency and connecting tourists to the town. So some of the actions here were around a tourism strategy, public art, expanding all art and culture and heritage offerings, continuing to work on workforce and talent attraction, looking at innovation hubs and business incubators. And at our last session, one of the recommendations was looking at how to attract green businesses and supporting businesses to become more green. So natural resources and environment, protect and enhance the natural environment. So we do have a number on water, which was very top of mind for community members. Protect water resources, providing access to safe drinking water and continuing to meet standards. A focus on water conservation. And then the last one was added through the consultation process as well, looking at natural heritage more broadly in the urban forest that you have. So some of the actions are around low-impact development, looking at how to manage stormwater, how to preserve trees, some of the smart meter, water meters that we heard about earlier tonight as well. Land use planning. The land use planning aligns with the official plan and directions from the province. So it's looking at managing and directing land use towards healthy, livable, and safe communities. So we talk about mixed-use development, coordinating land use and infrastructure planning. And again, that well-connected community came through in this one, both in terms of social cohesion and being connected to get around within the community. So we talk about complete streets that support walking, biking, cycling, transit, and getting around. It's not just car-focused. Green infrastructure, and how to manage stormwater. Under social well-being, we talk about an engaged and inclusive community for all. Affordable housing came up quite a bit through the community consultations. So we have identified a role for the town to support affordable housing where possible and community services, providing accessible social and community programs, looking at recreation opportunities both indoors and outdoors, and healthy food was top of mind for folks as well, and making that local where possible. And again, that strong social networks. So under this one, we have actions related to diversity and inclusion, helping people access the information that they're looking for through the town web portal, looking at housing solutions, and then looking at what are the options that the town can do to help support food recovery, so there isn't so much waste and that food can be used, and the importance of community engagement. And the last one, transportation. The transportation system was about reducing the dependence of using your car for everything locally and promoting other forms of transportation. This one, we had quite a bit of discussion around what can you do within the town, and then what is your role related to those commuting outside the town. So we've focused most of the actions on things that can happen right within the town of Orangeville, so shifting to towards more sustainable, efficient transportation, looking at access to transit, looking at connectivity and safety. And then the examples are things around carpooling, car sharing, looking at active transportation, looking at maintaining and enhancing trail systems, including bike racks. So we have sort of those multimodal options. And then, of course, electric vehicles, which ties back to that climate lens. So that's sort of the main piece of the plan. The plan has a series of actions that are in an action implementation table. And for each one, we have identified the municipal leads. We've identified potential partners. So that's not necessarily an exhaustive list, but this is sort of a best fit in terms of what those organizations' mandates are. By no means does that mean you can't bring other people into the tent. The timelines, short, medium, and long term, and then financial considerations are in a range, and we worked with the steering committee to establish those based on their knowledge of sort of upcoming plans and initiatives and where things might make a logical fit. We've also included in that implementation section a piece around setting annual priorities so that it can align into work plans. So that's an opportunity if there's a new funding pot that comes out that's related to something that's maybe in your medium term, you can move that up. So that's the great thing about having the actions as a separate piece, because you'll always be able to align with your goals and strategies. We've got oversight and governance, so the importance of continuing with the steering committee within the town as a coordinating body to make sure that that prioritization happens and that there's integration within the town budgets, looking at policies and plans that are coming up, and having that coordination function. Communication, education, and outreach were some of the key things that community were excited about in this process, that they were part of it as we developed the plan and hoped that that would continue. So we've made some recommendations for that. Of course, seeking funding wherever the opportunity arises. For plan renewal, we're suggesting the plan be renewed every 5 years, and then measuring and reporting on those 40 indicators. We've suggested every 2 years. It does take a bit of time to get some things moving. It also takes time to pull all of that data together and report on your progress. So we're suggesting every two years to start, and that can change if you need it to. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Susan, for the presentation, and your team who's worked very diligently, and as well the community at large who has participated a great deal in this plan, which is sort of a long time coming to fruition. So I'd like to make the motion with a couple small amendments, if I could, and then perhaps get into discussions. But the two things that I'd like to add to the motion, which of course would be the adoption of the plan in its current form. First is to put a date on the first biennial reporting, just so that this doesn't sit on a shelf and someone says, hey, when did those 2 years happen? So I would propose that in June of 2021, we would have our first report. And the second thing I'd like to include is that, as you can tell by the description and the measures in it, this plan will touch all aspects of the municipality. We see it with the water meters, we see it with the recreation, we'll see it with the planning later tonight. And with that in mind, I'd like this plan to be referenced, or I would suggest that this plan be referenced in staff reports moving forward, much in the same way that the strategic plan is referenced in staff reports. So I'm not sure how that would be worded, Madam Clerk, but perhaps, something to the effect of, and that staff reports moving forward reference the appropriate sections of the SNAP for council consideration.
Very good. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And just a couple of comments. I would like to support Councillor Peters' motion, so I'll second that. But I have a couple of comments if it's fair to share that at this point. I've had an opportunity to review a number of reports, Ms. Hall. And I have to admit, this is going to be the second time I've actually said this in council. This is one of the best reports that I've had a chance to review. It is more than a report, it is a strategic plan. And again, my compliments and really kudos to Councillor Peters for his vision. He has really been a champion, and one that I think has rubbed off on all of us. For those of us who have in fact been close at heart to these activities in different ways. In my other world, I'm part of a rather significant committee, a sustainability committee, so we've had the opportunity to share some dialogue previously. But I'm most impressed by the milestones and some of the recommendations that are provided here, and I think your comment, Councillor Peters, your motion is very well, very much in tune to what this strategic plan is all about. You know, I just wanted to share a point that, you know, I really like some of the actions here, you know, green, connected, healthy, thriving community, how it embraces everything, a part of our community and what it should be. It is going to take time, and I'm glad that you actually pointed that out. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. We have the opportunity for some of the low-hanging fruit to maybe possibly capitalize on. You know, the water refill stations is one that just comes to mind, you know, off the top of my head. But we have so many other things that have been in place, and again, kudos to our Economic Development Office too as well for seeing some of this with the electric charging stations. And we have so many things that are in place, but we can do much more. And so I'm really looking forward to supporting, and hopefully we'll get the rest of council to support the motion that's on the table.
Very good. Yeah, it seems like, to me, sustainability and livability kind of are meshed together. And I think those municipalities who would embrace that idea are going to move forward positively and be great places to live in the future. So we already have a great town, but we can build on that, as Councillor Andrews has just said. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. And we're going to now vote on the amendment, I guess, friendly amendment, proposed by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Okay, and then we need a motion to receive and to, I guess, put into effect. It's all part of the same. Okay, very good. So we're good on that front, Madam Clerk? All clear? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Moving along, we have no statutory public meetings today. We have no consent motions. We're going to move to staff reports. 10.1. This is a report on pregnancy and parental leave for members of council. I'm not aware of any upcoming issues surrounding that. However, this is, I take it, a housekeeping matter. There could be an incident or application of this. That's a bad choice of words. Sorry. Application of parental leave for members of council in the future, and so this, I guess, officially puts it in place as policy. So can we have a motion, Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh? All in favor? Okay. 10.2. This is a zoning bylaw amendment, the application for Faulkner Courtyard Incorporated. And this is that the application be received and that the zoning bylaw amendment application Z2/18 and amending zoning bylaw included as attachment 1 of this report be approved. May I have a motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Thank you. Moving along to 10.3, this is a tender award for the reconstruction of Gifford and Faulkner Streets, and it is a tender award. The staff be authorized to transfer an additional $150,000 to capital account out of general capital reserves for a shortfall in funding allocated to this project. Any discussion by council members? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Jones. Sorry for not giving you the pretext on this one, but I noticed in the report that the engineer's estimate was in the $1.5 million range. The 1.4 that it came in at appears to be in that range. So could you perhaps give just a bit of background on why the 1.2 or 1.3 was carried instead of perhaps the 1.5 that the engineer had estimated? Or maybe I've got my numbers wrong, but I'll let you correct me.
Yes, Your Worship, if I could defer that to Mr. Lackey, please.
Mr. Lackey. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters. The tenders came in slightly higher, as you can see, and I think that is just something that we've observed over the last couple years. That's been slightly inflated. The other thing that we've noticed that not the typical contractors that we see have bid on this project, and so anyways, we've just seen a slight increase in the amount that's been tendered.
Okay, thank you. So may I have a motion to receive this and to approve the additional $150,000? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Thank you. We have a number of committee or board minutes that have been given to council, which include the Committee of Adjustment meeting of June the 5th, 2019, the Orangeville Accessibility and Seniors Advisory Committee meeting minutes of May 7th, and Sustainable Orangeville minutes of June the 4th. Any comments on these minutes from council members? May I have a motion to accept? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. Item 12, question period. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, step right up.
Good evening. This is more of a gratitude than it is a question. On behalf of the Dufferin County Cultural Resource Circle, I've come to council today to say thank you to council for their support at Indigenous Peoples Day, and to let you know it was a fabulous event. We've heard some great things. We had a jazz and blues singer that apparently from 2 roads away sound like Larry Kurtz. So he may have something to think about. But overall, it was well attended. We had a very positive feedback, and I just wanted to bring the thank you from us to council.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Very much. Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Mr. Halliday.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I heard it straight when Mr. Sunsil was speaking about the water bills.
Yes.
And you were talking about the water rates bylaw prohibits, I mean, I understand that it prohibits staff from making any changes or adjusting or waiving fees, but it doesn't prohibit council, does it?
That's my understanding, that we are, if we open that door up, Mr. Halliday, it's problematic for the town.
Right.
So to this point, we've asked town to investigate each of these instances as they've come up and provide reports to us. And it appears that, you know, there's an issue at the residence, not the meters. That's where we're at this point. But
right.
As far as clarification on bylaws, I guess town council can make changes. That would be correct.
Right. I just wanted to point out, I understand your apprehension, I get it. But I just wanted to make sure that I had it straight.
Madam Clerk, may I ask for your confirmation on this? Okay, Mr. Jones, can we have a little clarification? Yeah.
Certainly, Your Worship.
We don't want to throw Madam Clerk under the bus on her last day, so we'll let you
Certainly not.
take the hit here.
Your Worship, certainly when bylaws are passed, they are direction to staff, they're not suggestion to staff. Staff cannot choose to disregard a bylaw in whole or in part. It is passed by council. However, council does have the option of waiving a portion of a bylaw in whole or in part if they feel it is the right thing to do. I would suggest that if this is something that council is considering, we are looking to up our water and wastewater rates bylaw prior to the end of 2019 to set the rates for the next 5 years. Potentially, there could be some consideration in there with respect to some of these issues, recognizing, of course, that there would have to be very clear criteria associated with any measures that would provide relief. The reality of it is that these water meters, as I say, our understanding is that they don't overmeasure, and if the house that's used this water doesn't pay, then it's absorbed, if you'll pardon the pun, by the rest of the ratepayers.
Right. So, You are correct, Mr. Halliday. We do have the authority to waive in certain cases, but we've elected not to this point.
That's all I wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you. Okay. Now, we have just one more ask here. Any other questions from the audience? No? Okay, moving on to 13.1. And this is agenda and resolution of the annual shareholders meeting to be held on Wednesday, June 26th for the Orangeville Hydro Limited. This refers to a proxy to appoint myself and in my stead Deputy Mayor McIntosh in my absence to attend to the vote and to represent the corporation of the town of Orangeville at the annual shareholders meeting. So may I have a motion to accept that recommendation? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any questions by councillors? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we have a number of other correspondence here that to review. The dividend payment at 13.2, June 17th. I believe this was a record dividend payment of $566,000 to the town of Orangeville. So thank you, Orangeville Hydro, for their efficient monitoring of hydro in this town and running an efficient organization. We also have 13.3, which was a motion that went to County of Dufferin on June 18th regarding commercial industrial vacancy rebate program. We did present that, Councillor Sherwood, at the county meeting. And for those of you that don't know, it's the County of Dufferin that sets and oversees tax rates in our county, including the town of Orangeville. So in order to effect a cancellation of the commercial industrial vacancy rebate program, we have to take it to the county for their review first. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just to add to that, it was a unanimous vote at the county. They quite like that. So kudos to the county and our neighbors for supporting us in this endeavor. Right.
Okay, we also have additional items from the town of Amaranth, reducing litter and waste in our communities, from the township of East Garifraxa, a shared services review, town of Mono as well, a shared services review, and County of Dufferin as well, a shared services review, Township of Melanchthon, review of Ontario Good Roads Association and the Rural Ontario Municipal Association. Town of Mono is recommending changes to the Highway Traffic Act fines, and the Town of Mono has a report regarding funding cuts to library services. So I'd like to have a motion that all correspondence items listed above be received. Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. We also have information items in item 14. So 14.1, an economic development report. And we have 14.2, Bill 108. This is a recommendation that information listed above be received. Councillor Andrews, you wish to comment on this?
I do. Thank you
Yes.
very much, Your Worship. And I just wanted to comment on item 14.1, which is the Economic Development and Culture Report. Again, an example of some great things that are happening not only within the community, but also at the town with some great leadership with Mr. Osmond and also Ms. Phillips too as well. Very impressed by this document. I will say candidly, for those that are either in the council chambers or those that are watching, listening, this particular document was in fact a reflection of the previous council. But at the same time, those that were part of the Economic Development and Culture Committee at that time also have really spearheaded some great things. A part of this particular document, and moving forward, we have a great new committee which is known as BDAC, which is Business Economic Development and Culture Committee. A couple of points, if there's an opportunity for those in the community to be aware of, one of the great things, and there's so many great things happening economically, some investment in business, we would always like to have more. We do have some challenges again with some land. The Starter Company is a very unique one, which I don't want to get into much detail, but again, with the impact of the provincial government, we did lose our coordinator that was responsible for that, but that has been taken in-house by town staff, and I think that that will be a continued supporter of some young entrepreneurs and maybe looking at ways of hopefully benefiting our community. But there's a lot of detail here that identifies some very positive things economically and also culturally. And again, I'm very appreciative that the document is available for members of council. We look forward to a report for 2019's achievements, obviously in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. So may I have a motion to accept 14.1 and 14.2? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 15, there have been no notices of motion given prior to the meeting. Councillor Post, maybe there is.
Mine is for notice of motion at meeting.
Notice of motion at meeting.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
At our most recent meeting of the Accessible and Age-Friendly Orangeville Committee meeting on June the 4th, it was asked of me in a discussion, it was brought up that at times when we close down streets for some of our cultural events, especially during even weekly on our farmers market days throughout the blues and jazz, we actually eliminate a few of our accessible parking spots by doing that, that are located just outside of Town Hall. So the members of the committee have asked if I could bring forward to council as a notice of motion a resolution looking for support and for investigation from town staff on how we can add in some temporary parking spaces when there is those events. Those events are so important to our economic development, but creating a barrier-free community is equally as important. So I thought it was a really great recommendation from our committee to bring forward, and I did let them know that I would bring it forward at this meeting. Hopefully Ms. Graytrix on her last, one of her last tasks would be to pretty that motion up a little bit in time for our next meeting. As part of that as well, and I don't know if it's appropriate to add it to the motion, there has also been some discussion about some things that other municipalities do when it comes to accessible parking. One of which is that the municipality in Toronto and some others allow accessible parking in no parking areas. So as part of that same motion, perhaps we can have town staff investigate how other municipalities coordinate their accessible parking bylaws to see if it's appropriate for us to make some changes or amendments to what we have to make it even more accessible for our community. If you could pretty that up, that would be fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think that when the farmer's market is on, those spaces could be moved temporarily onto Broadway, for instance, during the Aura Festival. Yeah, good thought. Yeah. Okay. Any other notices of motion at meeting? Seeing none. We have some unfinished business, and that was 17.1. Something that's been talked about for quite some time, and we finally come to terms of reference for an Orangeville Transit Task Force. A recommendation that terms of the reference for the Orangeville Transit Task Force be received and approved, and the staff be directed to advertise to recruit applicants for the Orangeville Transit Task Force. May I have a motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? I'm sorry, hold on. Councillor Peters. Yes,
Thank you, Mr.
comments.
Mayor.
My apologies.
Question for the group, I suppose. Part of the report had a sort of a blank space for council representation. Is that to be determined tonight or at a future date?
Count was 2 members, I believe, correct? And that the mayor sits as an ex officio member, so I would be out of the mix, although I will likely be at each meeting of that committee. So I think we should maybe make that decision tonight. And are there members of council that wish to sit on that? Or have you had a chance to digest and think about it? Everybody's got a full plate. Yeah. Yes. So I'm sorry, Councillor Andrews.
We are missing a member of council this evening who has expressed interest in this area too, and also had some past experiences with it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
not to discount their interest.
Well, I think maybe we should defer this decision then until next meeting. You're right, Councillor Taylor has had experience on the transit committee and has expressed interest. And we're going to advertise. It's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get members of the public to put their name in. So maybe by next meeting we'll be able to pull this all together at that time. Okay, so we'll defer that particular, but we are going to vote in terms of reference, and we've already had the motion, so we're going to just call the vote now. All in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, on to new business. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I perhaps should have done this under notice of motion at meeting, but I think we could probably waive notice. It's a very simple one. Looking through the correspondence, and of course, all of us having attended the All Councils meeting a while back, it seems that there's a motion by a variety of other townships within Dufferin County to support the shared services investigation. I think it'd be prudent while we're here to make a very similar or identical motion so that the county knows that we're behind the investigation of that exercise.
Good thought, Councillor Peters. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I would just like to pass on congratulations to Councillor Lisa Post. Wonderful Saturday. It was well done, and it was awesome.
Absolutely. Okay, so Councillor Post, I'm sorry. Yes.
I would like to second Councillor Peters' motion, because I think we should call a vote on that. Do I have to put forward a motion to waive notice on that, Madam Clerk? To waive notice on Councillor Peters?
No, through you to the mayor. If council votes on it, you've effectually waived notice.
Right.
So I'd like to second his motion. But I would like to thank Deputy Mayor for those comments and thank all of council for attending and supporting. And I received a number of comments throughout the course of Saturday about how pleased members of the community were to see a council so engaged in focusing on inclusivity and making sure that everybody is acknowledged and feels represented. So thank you all for being a part of the day. It was extremely important. And it was also great to see that all of us also headed over to Indigenous Peoples Day at some point throughout as well, because it was also a fantastic event. So.
Yeah, it was a good weekend of diversity and inclusion, I guess. I sensed the Celebrate Your Awesome was much better attended both by vendors and by the public. Have you got any numbers that you can share with us on vendors that participated? I'm sorry, Councillor Post.
I think that our actual number was that we had about 17 vendors there. We actually turned some away just because I wasn't sure what our space was going to look like. So we do know that we do have a little bit of room extra for next year, and we're estimating that our numbers fell between about 5,000 and 7,000 people attending throughout the course of the day. That's just kind of a guesstimate based on information that we gave out, brochures and handouts. We know that it was definitely more than double what we had last year, and we estimated last year at about 2,500. So we have to thank Mother Nature as well for giving us a fantastic day for it, for sure. But
very good. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, let's vote on the motion. I'm sorry. All in favor? That's Councillor Peters' motion to support the review of shared services with Dufferin County. All right. Any other new business, members of council? Okay, so moving along to 19, this is confirmation bylaw. May I have a motion for this? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? And we're to adjournment. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're complete for tonight. Thank you.